Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show that works a little bit, hopefully, trying to make the world safe for ADHD. I am a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist in private practice, and I spend a lot of time evaluating children and adults for ADHD. And I don't do as much therapy now as I used to because I just don't have time. There's a real big demand in my area for the kind of stuff I do. So figuring that's the greatest good, and that's where most of my time and energy goes to. Like I said, I have a lot of interest in ADHD. I have a lot of patients with ADHD. I also have a child, well, he's an adult now, with ADHD. And this is back in the day when we didn't know a whole heck of a lot about ADHD, or at least we knew a lot less than we do now. Like I've said, I think for the last few weeks, I went through an APA, American Psychological Association, approved program. That means they came and inspected and all kinds of stuff like that. I never heard word one about ADHD. Nothing. Absolutely zero. And even after a while, when I was sure there was something going on that I didn't exactly understand, I had a couple of friends who had done pediatric psychology, treating kids, at a very Tony college, and had them look at him, and they still didn't know what to make of things, and they tested him, but they didn't give him anything that would have shown ADHD symptoms. Not a dang thing. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this is because it takes a fair amount of courage to be the parent of an ADHD child. Of course, later on in life, it takes quite a lot of courage to be an adult with ADHD. But for the parent with ADHD, the courage part is that there are a lot of ignorant people in the world. And unfortunately, a lot of these ignorant people have positions of some responsibility and authority that can affect your child's life. And if you're not sure what you're dealing with, you'll be like me and kind of bumble along and assume they know what they're talking about, and that their decisions are probably the best for everybody concerned. And I tell you that is not the truth. Okay, in my area, theoretically, we have a law that requires teachers to get regular training on ADHD. And I have talked to several teachers, most of whom are coming by for some other services, but sometimes they're looking for help with ADHD themselves. But I asked them about that course, and they say, it's just a pencil whip job. They give us 20 minutes, somebody who we never heard of and doesn't really know much about it, and that's it. It's like, holy cow, really? So it hasn't really gotten a lot better. And I can tell, I give, when I'm evaluating a child, I always give a set of observation forms for the teacher to fill out. And I can tell from some of the comments that they have no clue what ADHD is. As far as I can tell, what they notice is somebody's disrupting my classroom or they're not. And that's pretty much it. And they are not, they don't have expertise, let's just put it that way. Basically what they want is their classroom quiet and easier to manage. And I can understand, that to a certain extent. An unmedicated ADHD child, especially a little boy, is likely to be a handful to try to keep in his seat and keep working and not disrupt the class and not do corny jokes like falling out of his seat all the time or that kind of thing. So you've got the teachers who really don't honestly understand. I mean, and I obviously I'm over generalizing because some teachers are just great. A lot of them because they're parents of kids with ADHD or because they have ADHD themselves. They are the good ones. They know what's going on. They know what works. They know what doesn't work, and they're way more insightful. But we got a bunch of them who just don't want to be bothered, I guess would be the best way to put it. And I have a lot of troubles with the way school is taught anyway. Think about memory. What do teachers always ask students to do? They ask them to memorize. What do teachers never teach students? How to memorize. Okay? I mean, there's a whole study of memory and memory enhancement called mnemonics, and there are all these different techniques that can help you memorize things more easily with less difficulty and greater efficiency. But we never learn those. We get learn all the capitals of all the states. And why do you do that? Most of the time they do it like I did it when I was a kid and just keep repeating the same thing over and over again and hoping it sticks in your head. That is not the way to do it. But I digress. All I'm saying is that it takes a certain amount of courage to be a parent of an ADHD child. And one of the first things that helps you is making darn sure that that's what you've got. Okay? ADHD, unfortunately, there's no telltale birth sign or something like that shows that you've got ADHD. You look exactly like the kid who's got behavior problems in some instances, okay? And the problem with all of that is that they're going to want to punish your child in ways they're just punitive. They don't do anything about his future or her future behavior, and they don't necessarily do anything to improve the situation, and they certainly don't do a darn thing to improve your child's attitude towards school. And a lot of times they're reacting on really bad information. I remember my ADHD son got into trouble at school for fighting on the playground. Well, what had actually happened is that there was we were calling an intellectually deficient girl who was being mainstreamed in their class, and they were at recess, and some boys were picking on her, making fun of her, just not treating her well, and he stood up for her, and it got a little bit physical. Well, the teacher comes in late to this situation. Actually, it wasn't even a teacher. I think it was a lunchroom worker who was doing playground duty. I don't understand that, but that's what apparently happened. And she totally got the story wrong. And when she told that story, he got outraged. And, he wasn't exactly abusive, but he said, "You're lying. That isn't what happened." Which, considering he was 8 or 9 years old, probably isn't too much of a stretch. But, he got suspended, I think, primarily because of that. But they never did find out that he was actually, trying to be Prince Valiant and be chivalrous and, protect the weak. And I just sort of assumed that the school knew what they was doing. Big and went along with it. Now, if I'd known the whole story, I would have gone in there and there'd been desk pounding upon. Well, not initially, because not really I'm not really prone to pounding on desks. I have the ability to stop people in their tracks with my words, but I don't typically, get physical about anything. But that's one of the things I'm saying, though, that as a parent of an ADHD child, and of course later on in life as an adult with ADHD, you're going to be in situations where people are going to totally take the wrong view of what's going on, and you're going to have to defend yourself in some way or other, and you've got to have the courage to speak up, and especially if it's your kid, because that I still have regrets about some of the things I didn't do with my child, because frankly, and in that stage of the game, I was kind of ignorant about what I had in my hands and what was possible and what wasn't possible. So if I'd known then what I know now, as they always say, it would have been a lot different. There would have been a bunch of coaches and a bunch of teachers, and even a few neighbors who would have said, wait a minute, who I would have set some limits with that I didn't. And, I regret that. I mean, I do, and, you looking back over your past is the sure fire way to get to a whole bunch of regret, because there's always a bunch of stuff we could have done or maybe should have done, but it just didn't happen. I didn't do it. And like I said, I'll regret that for, well, every time I think about it, probably. But you, like almost everything else in life, you do the best you can with what you've got. But you've got to understand, and you may be lucky, and you may live in the most enlightened school district on the planet, where all the teachers are thoroughly trained, and the school district has plenty of money, so they're not always trying to take shortcuts, and on and on and on. Or you may not, okay? And either way, you have to have the courage to be firm, to know what you need. And the only way to know what you need is to have had a good evaluation that hopefully will tell you what you need. And you also have to be a really practiced observer. Once you figure out that he or she's not just acting out for the sake of acting out, but that there's something neurologic going on, and there are things they really can't do, or can't do very easily, you have to know that. You have to have observed it. Take the time to actually look at your kid. And I know sometimes that's not easy to do. You come home after a hard day at work. The last thing you want to do is deal with more stress at home. But you've got to. You've got to be an observer. You've got to know what your kid's good at. You've got to know what he or she naturally likes. You've got to know what they naturally don't like. And what they're good at, what they're not good at. Maybe I already said that, but that's really important. Because I'm with Dodson on this. He says that ADHDers are characterized by what he calls an interest-based attention system. And what that means is, and that's why it's so confusing for people sometimes, he can pay attention for hours. If it's something that he or she is naturally drawn to, and there's no generalizing. Well, I guess you could say they all seem to like video games, but some of them don't. But the idea with your child is knowing what gets his or her interest, what piques his or her interest, what they go, oh, wow, this is really cool stuff. You need to know that, and you need to file that away in your ready file. I mean, one that probably come out every week, because that's That's your key to get in. That's really important to know. And that's really important for your child to know, because odds are that if he finds a vocation that allows him to make use of that interest, he'll be a happy camper and be able to prosper, or at least make a living. So you've got to know that. It's important. It's not one of those, oh, well, maybe, maybe not. You've got to know that. It's important. And you've got to know that you don't ever punish them for not being able to do something that they can't do. That's a tricky one, okay? There are things that they naturally are able to do, and there are things that they have a real hard time doing. You know, they have a hard time with time management. They have a hard time with starting a project and following through on it. That's not them being difficult to live with. That's them having ADHD. And so you've got to understand that. Okay? Never punish, never punish them for something they're not capable of doing. That's a tricky one. I wish I had known that back in my active parenting days. I wish I had known that. And I wish there were a lot of things I'd known back in those days. And that's part of the reason that, part of the thing that motivates me to do this stuff pretty regularly is I want to make sure that you folks out there who are just starting all this ADHD journey stuff have better information than I had. And so, when I talk about courage, I talk about, first of all, knowing what you've got, understanding it, need to know and understand what's going on with your ADHD child. And then pick your battles. You don't want to just go in there, slamming your briefcase or whatever you carry down. But you need to be strong enough, courageous enough to know when you have to fight back. And that's something that's real important for your child, because the biggest problem with ADHD is there's nothing that really looks that different from being a behavior problem. I mean, there isn't, they don't have a little star on their forehead or something. They sometimes act very badly, and the more threatened they feel, the more frustrated they feel, the more scared they feel, the more likely you are to have some kind of an outburst. So, but you can't let that, you shouldn't have done that anyway. Well, you know that, but the circumstances, the way their brain works, you don't want to punish them like it's something they had control over. And you don't want to let the school system punish them like it's something they had control over. That isn't fair. That isn't right. That isn't going to be helpful. I mean, the hardest thing I think an ADHD kid has is to get through school. And that most of that is because they get punished for almost everything they do. They speak out of turn, they get punished. They try to make the class laugh by falling out of their chair or something. I don't know what's so popular about falling out of chairs, but I hear that story all the time. Anyway, to make the class laugh, they get into trouble. And they have a horrible time doing the projects and being super compliant, like seems to be increasingly demanded by our school systems. For no particular reason I can think of. Anyway, so it takes courage and knowledge to be a good parent of an ADHD child. The knowledge is not that hard to come by, not in this day and age. Of course, and I'll say this forever. The first thing you need is a good evaluation. Somebody who knows about ADHD. somebody who has some experience with ADHD. But you, and there are people out there who are making diagnoses that have no business doing it, and so you need to make sure you weed them out. Make sure you get somebody who's respected in your community. Okay, so you got a good evaluation. You've got to read. I mean, you have got to get, so you know some of the people who are experts in the field. You know, you've got to know like Ned Hollowell. You've got to know Russell Barkley. And there are more, but you have to know the people who are writing about ADHD, the people who are the movers and shakers in the ADHD community. Dodson, is another one that comes to mind. You have to know these people. You have to read their stuff. They'll tell you about ADHD, and they will answer your questions. And I have. Well, the thing you've got to watch out for is people who are very scientifically oriented, people who and have enthusiasms, because they're the dangerous ones. They'll try to convert the world to their particular brand of fish oil or whatever. And but you want somebody who's actually does research and or who works with tons of ADHD families. You need somebody like that and you need to be reading them regularly. And you can watch this show, and there are different things on YouTube that are really good. But you need to educate yourself, and you need to understand that your child didn't ask for this, and that it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Okay, because one of you's got a whole history of ADHD in their family history. Maybe both of you, but at least one of you. And if you're the one who married into the ADHD family, remember what attracted you. Probably it's that they were lively and creative and fun to be with, and on and on and on. And so that's why you ended up marrying into that clan. Kind of was that way for me. Okay. But you have to have the courage, and you have to know when to use it, because your child is going to need your help. He's going to need you to help make the system work for him. And a lot of times that's not going to be a natural thing. And that takes a little bit of courage, my ADHD child took me to places I had tried to avoid my whole life, like the principal's office. I spent my whole academic career just making sure I didn't get into trouble, because who knows, terrible things happen there. But boy, I got used to that. And you have to. And you can't go in there like you were the irresponsible parent. You can't go in like that. You've got to go in knowing what you've got, knowing that it's got nothing to do with your parenting style. It's got everything to do with genetics. And you don't have control over that. You can't change that. Okay, so that is me for the week here. And somewhere around here, there's a place to make comments and ask questions, and please do. I would love to know what you'd like me to talk about, if it's something different than the things I've been covering, or even if it is something I've covered. Let me know. The great thing about this is you can get out to a bunch of people, but the bad thing about it is sometimes you're not sure exactly what's resonating with people. So you need to help me out with that, please. Okay? And my website is terrygingrassphd.com. And my book is Strategic Parenting, How to Parent ADHD Kids, and that's available on Amazon. And I do ADHD coaching. Most of that's with executives, but I do some kids and some college students particularly. So if I can help you, let me know. Okay, we'll catch you next time.